Step in my dojo, you step in my dojo, you step in my.
Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can be notified when we've got more awesome content for you. Lots of love. I'm ill.Gates. Enjoy. Okay, so dub is a genre of electronic music that grew out of reggae in the late 1960s and 70s and is commonly considered a subgenre, although it is extended far beyond the scope of reggae. The style consists predominantly of partly or completely instrumental remixes of existing recordings, and is achieved by significantly manipulating and reshaping the recordings, usually through the removal of some or all of the vocals. Emphasis on the rhythm section. The stripped down drum and bass track is sometimes referred to as a riddim, and that's where the word riddim, R-I-D-D-I-M, comes from. So American music enthusiasts love to co-opt existing genres of music and use them to name genres of music that have little or nothing to do with the name that they stole. Dubstep is a classic example of that, as is Riddim. So the early UK dubstep was basically heavily inspired by dub music and techno. Okay, it borrowed the stripped down drum and bass heavy compositions of dub music, a lot of the delays and kind of like echo chamber sort of mixing style of dub music, and then fused it with electronic techno sorts of influences, you know, drum machines and synthesizers and pattern sequencing, and created a genre of music that kind of grew out of the UK garage scene in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then that kind of got stolen by Americans, and they turned it into aggressive robot ear rape music that we all know and love today. The modern dubstep style was, I guess, kind of most recognizably influenced by acts like Skrillex and Excision. But they were really trying to make a more aggressive, more synth and sound design heavy, more heavy metal influenced version of this UK style of music, dubstep. So after that happened to dubstep, and that became much more popular than the UK style of dubstep, the UK artists started kind of referring to the classic Jamaican / techno influenced genre as Riddim, at which point the Americans took Riddim to be their own and made another completely aggressive, completely like heavy metal influenced kind of barbaric caveman version of Riddim. But yeah, Riddim actually is a Jamaican term, and it refers to the instrumental kind of, synths, drums, bass, and dubbed out instrumentals, and a lot of dance hall, they would have one riddim, which is like the kind of instrumental beat. Hip hop, you would call that a beat. In Jamaican music, you'd call it a riddim. And in a lot of dance hall, you'd have like, one of the most famous riddims is like the slang tang riddim, which ended up kind of becoming a lot of different songs. There are many different vocals over the same rhythm, because in Jamaica the laws of copyright are a lot more relaxed. So you could have a different vocalist over the exact same backing track and not have to actually rehire no one would care, so, and a lot of time you'll see Jamaican music will sample other Jamaican music and nobody cares. You are not allowed to swear in Jamaican music. That's a really, really big deal. So if you ever hear the word fuck in a Jamaican song, that is not made in Jamaica, right? That's not like, I think you can still say pussy, and then they have like their own swear words, like like bumbaclot and radsclot, and then a lot of like very homophobic words that I will not repeat. But a lot of Jamaican music it does include a lot of homophobia, but it does not include the word fuck. So if you ever hear the word fuck, you're listening to music that came from outside of Jamaica. Anyway, let's check out this slang tang riddim, and we can hear some of the different kinds of tracks that came out of this, but this is what a riddim is. This is one of the first ever dancehall songs. Oh! Yeah! But yeah, so you can hear that the basic ingredients are the same, but it's been essentially like a remixed. You can hear someone's hands on the faders of the mixer coming in and out. A lot of the parts are coming out, and a lot of the instruments are missing. The beat is missing in weird spots. There's a lot more delays, a lot more reverbs, right? So that that style of remixing is basically where you're remixing the stems of the song. You have like all of the different separate multi-tracks, and you're essentially playing the mixer and bringing the tracks in and out, playing the delays, playing the reverbs, putting a lot of time and attention into the echo, into the spring reverb. A lot of the reverbs will be like a physical spring that you're running the audio signals through a spring, and that's where you get that kind of like boingy, lo-fi sort of a sound, right? So that's really typical of dub production, but a lot of dub music does not necessarily have vocals in it. I was just showing you kind of a few different versions of instrumentals, different versions of that rhythm. So really, one of the main here, let's go to here. Yeah, okay. So the main, I would recommend you check out this documentary, Dub Echoes, and I've linked that in the document here. There's a Dub Echoes documentary, but as well as this history of dub document. But in the late 1960s, right? The classic story of the invention of dub is in 1968, Kingston, Jamaica sound system operator Ruddy Redwood went to Duke Reed's Treasure Isle studio to cut a one-off dub plate. So a dub plate is like a single pressing record, where instead of like making a master and running off like many versions of a record, you get a piece of acetate on metal. It smells like a crayon, and it's basically like there's a metal plate covered in acetate, and the cutting head would cut one copy that you would not make subsequent copies of, and because it was made out of acetate, not vinyl, they would wear out really quickly, right? You get maybe like 50 plays tops out of a dub plate. But this dub plate would allow you to have custom music, right? Custom music that nobody else would have. And that was a big deal for competing with the other sound systems and the other DJs on the island of Jamaica, and specifically in Kingston, because there's only really one major city in Jamaica, and that's Kingston, right? So this underground sound system culture in Jamaica came about like in the late 60s, where basically, King Tubby, he was actually like an electrical engineer, more than a recording engineer at first. And he was like, he was one of the first people that would like transmute the studio from a kind of like documentary place where, the producer was like a technician, like an engineer, they weren't really making any creative decisions. And, the studio was really like you jam in your jam space with your band, and then you come to the studio to just record before. But King Tubby, he was like a real scientist. He was a real electrical engineer. So he actually, made his own sound systems and his own amplifiers. The amplifiers would have like echoes and stuff in them that a normal amplifier wouldn't. And the sound systems would be really, really big, really loud. And he actually put like LED lights and shit in the sound systems, like in the 60s, right? And that inclusion of LED lights and echoes in the amplifiers and the electrical customization of the sound system really showed the people when they came, the audience members when they came, that not only is their sound system bigger and louder and better than the other sound systems on the island, but the fact that there was lights in the speakers was a visible demonstration that like this shit is custom. This is like an underground thing. You cannot get this anywhere else. And it put the sound system in front of the music, right? So anyway, fast forward to 1968. Ruddy Redwood goes to Duke Reed's Treasure Island studio to cut off one-off dub plate. Engineer Byron Smith accidentally left the vocal track out, but Redwood kept the result and played it at his next dance with his DJ Wasi toasting over the rhythm. So the DJ in Jamaica, the DJ was actually like the MC, like in hip hop, and toasting was before rapping. So rapping actually came out of toasting when Cool Herc who's his parents are Jamaican, and he went to New York from Jamaica, and he brought like toasting to New York, where it kind of mutated and turned into rapping and became hip hop. So, but yeah, in Jamaica, you'd have like the DJ was the selector, and they would have one turntable and some echoes and shit. And then when they were changing the record, they'd put the echo on, and it would like echo. And then while they flip over the record, and then the DJ would introduce it and be like, "Hey, you know, blah blah blah, Ruddy Redwood, big tune coming up, etc., etc., etc." And would like introduce it and kind of rhyme and stuff to make it sound good, right? Anyway, so they're going out to the sound system that now, because this instrumental beat has this accidentally cut dub plate with an instrumental, has all this extra space, Wasi can toast more, and the audience can hear the drums and the bass more. And they, it was a big hit, like on a big sound system, stripped back music with lots of space for the drums and bass sounds awesome. So the audience loved it. The invention was a success, and Ruddy, needed to play the instrumental continuously for a half an hour to an hour that day because people just couldn't get enough. So the next day, Byron Lee, who was witness to this, told King Tubby that they needed to make some more instrumental tracks, as them people loved them, and they dubbed out vocals from "Ain't Too Proud to Beg" by Slim Smith, because King Tubby's innovative approach, the resulting instrumental track was more than just a track without a voice. King Tubby interchanged the vocals and the instrumentals, playing the vocals first, then playing the rhythm, then playing them together, and from this point on, they started to call such tracks versions. Okay, so there's a bit of debate about how that all happened. And they were working with a lot of the kind of like UK equipment from the BBC, because Jamaica used to be a British colony. And then when the British left, they left a lot of the studio equipment there because there's too much to bring back. And they're just like, we'll just get new equipment for England. And then these Jamaicans found themselves with some really high grade studio equipment, and then they had the sound systems, and it was like a competition, because the economy there was fucking terrible, especially when the British left. The economy was in a shambles, and really, music and partying, was one of the few kind of stable things about the economy at the point. So it really kind of, even though the island was essentially like a post-colonial slum, a ghetto, the sound system culture really took off, and it really put an emphasis with the producer as a creative part of the music and the sound systems in front. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like this content and you want to see more, it would really mean a lot for you to support the channel by subscribing, clicking like on this video, or dropping a comment below. Is there anything we missed? Is there anything else that you'd like to see? We are listening, so please don't be shy. Like, subscribe, and comment. This channel is for you, and we need to hear your voice.